This is the first of two videos on the use of the editing functions found in SongSurgeon Pro. Let's begin at the beginning with a quick review of each of these functions. Functions are found here under the Edit button, and we will go through these one at a time. The first thing that I want to just remind you of is how to select something. And when you select data on the waveform file, you essentially hold down your left mouse button and then you slide it. So if you watch here, I've just selected it, and you can tell it by the shaded area. And then of course, as you hover your mouse near the beginning or the end, you can grab that again and move it around, stretch it or shrink it as you need to. So that's how you select it. So with that being said, let's take a look at each of these functions. First of all, the cut function essentially copies this selected area to the clipboard, and it leaves the highlighted area there on the screen until you paste it. And then so once you paste it, it will actually paste this data at the insertion point, which is the progress indicator, which right now I have here, or I can move it clear here to the end of the song. It doesn't really matter. And it will paste it wherever this progress indicator is. And at the point in time that it actually pastes it, it will then cut or remove this from the waveform data display. So that's what cut is. Copy is just simply that. It makes a copy of this, it puts it on your clipboard, but it doesn't delete the selected area. Paste will not do anything with the selected area. It presumes that you already have something that you have copied to your clipboard. Paste merely inserts a copy of the data that's on your clipboard at the insertion point, which again is where this white progress indicator is, or this line. Delete deletes to state the obvious, which means as soon as I hit the delete key, this part is going to disappear. Okay, here we go. There you go. That part disappeared because it was removed, and I'm going to hit the undo button and bring it back. But that's delete. Insert silence and silence highlighted section. Now this does exactly what it says. Does it in a little different way under insert silence. There are several different ways to do this. You can insert it at the beginning of the song, at the end of the song, at the current position, which would again be this progress point, or progress indicator I should say. And then lastly, you have the ability here to insert silence where you have a section highlighted. So that means to say that if I highlight a section by left clicking and dragging, so if I've highlighted that area and then I clicked insert silence at the highlighted section, it will silence this whole area. And we're going to come back and talk about this in just a second, because I think it's a good tip for editing that probably many of you aren't using. Change volume does just that. You select an area by highlighting it, as we have here. You select change volume, and then you can increase or decrease the volume. And then of course once you save those changes, this file becomes permanent. Those changes become permanent. And fade in or fade out. Again, I think intuitively you know what that is. Most of the time you're going to use fade in at the beginning of a song or at the beginning of an introduction to a segment of a song, and fade out at the end. And it simply takes an area that you've selected and it gradually fades it in or increases the music, and then if you select fade it out, it gradually decreases the music or fades it out. So that's a brief review of each of these functions that are found in the editing box. I'll remind you that each of these functions also has a keyboard shortcut, which you can see over here on the right hand side, and those come in handy a lot of times so you don't have to use your mouse. So now that we've reviewed the basics, I'd like to switch gears and talk about two things. And the first of these is, how do we select an area, like this one that we show on the screen. And the second one is going to be, how do we best delete that area. So for the first one, which is to select the area, what you're going to obviously do to begin with is either listen to the song playing or the audio playing, and as it's playing, then pause it and note it in some way. I'm just going to move the cursor here, let it play a little bit. So we're playing. I can hit the pause button and stop it, and at the same time I can put a loop point there. And that's one of the things that I like to do in terms of sort of putting boundaries on the area that we're going to be editing. So I play it, I listen to it. When I reach the point that I think I'm going to start the editing, I set a loop point, and I don't get too carried away about the exactness of that because we can adjust the exactness a little bit later. But I get a beginning loop point, and then let's say I get an ending loop point over here. I'm just going to randomly select it. And again, don't get too carried away about the exactness. We'll deal with that later. But once you've set those and you've got an area defined, then your next step really is, in my mind, to have you zoom in. And once you've zoomed in, then you can better adjust these. And see, right now what we're doing is we're not even selecting the area yet. We're trying to define the boundaries of the area that we want to edit using loop points. And what I'm going to tell you is that as you adjust these by zooming in and by listening, and that's one of the values of using loop points, because you may want to hear it played several times repeatedly so you can continue to move these backward or forward until you get these set exactly to where you think you want them. Then and only then you go in, left click, hold down with your mouse, and drag this, highlight this particular area. Now once you have an area highlighted like I've just done here, your next step then is to delete it. And most of you probably do just that. You hit the delete key, or you go up here to the edit button and you select delete. And when you do that, watch what happens. The data disappears because it's deleted, which is as it should, but it takes the data that's remaining in this waveform file and it sort of pops it back to back, and that may or may not be useful for you. I know for me it can be a bit of a problem if that happens, because you'd like to find out where that original data point is, where you cut the data, where you deleted the data. So instead of doing that, what I like to do, and I'm going to undo this so we can see this again. So there we are. Let me go back and highlight it again. So what I like to do instead of using the delete key is I like to use, and I told you we'd come back to this, and this is it, silence the highlighted section. Because if we do that, watch what happens. Again, I don't think this is a surprise to you that that's what happens, but it essentially maintains the space between the area that you cut, so the beginning of that area and the end of that area. Now you may have a lot of extra dead space in this file that you don't want, and that's fine. We can go back and edit that out. But for instance, if you listen to this and you decide that this ending point or this beginning point of where you've cut isn't exact, you still have that defined on the screen for you, so you can go back and you can edit a little more of this if you need to by selecting it on either end. So this gives you the ability to go back in and fine-tune these areas at the beginning and the end, so you know that you have precisely cut this or deleted the area that you want. And then once you know that you have this exactly as you want, if you want to delete some or all of this space, you can. Now for me, I like to leave some amount of space when I delete segments of audio files, because it gives me a chance to sort of regroup and think about what's coming up next. You know, if you don't like that, if you want to put these back to back, you can go back in and you can select this whole area and delete it, and then you'll have it back to back. But if you do like I do, you may only want to delete part of that because you may want some number of seconds. Here we're about 229 and a half, and if I want to leave 5 segments of space between these 2 segments, I would select a good part of the silence that we have inserted here, and I would just go ahead and delete it. And it's working. It's just a little slow here because I have this video program running at the same time. But there you go. It has now deleted some of that time, and now I have a reasonable space between these 2 segments. that's really going to conclude this video for today, but I want to reemphasize to you again that I think this idea or this tip on deleting is a very useful one because it maintains the space. It allows you to see the beginning and the ending points that remain on the screen from what you've originally deleted, and it allows you still to adjust those, and it doesn't slap these back to back. SongSurgeon works like most other wave editing programs out there, that meaning that if you hit the edit key or you delete a section of the song, it will place the remaining parts of the wave data back to back, just like SongSurgeon does. But sometimes that isn't the most convenient way to do it, and that's why I wanted to show you this other way to do it, in which you actually insert silence over this area first, and then it gives you the ability to make some adjustments if you need to, and then do a final edit to reduce the amount of silent space or eliminate it completely if you want to do that.